It's very powerful when you bring those business leaders together and ask them what's keeping you awake at night at the moment. The raw data has value for those organizations, but of course they want a second opinion.
What caught my attention is a term that you used. As you said, data. How do you socialize data, you said?
We are there to provide some guidance for what that means for businesses when borrowing is more expensive, when prices are higher.
All right. Mr. Robert Willock, welcome to Merck Speaker's Corner.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very well, thank you.
Great. We usually in this podcast from Merck, we start with the usual question. Who are you?
Okay. So my name is Robert Willock. I'm a Brit in Dubai. Been here 11 years now. I work for the Economist Group.
Okay.
And of course, you will know the newspaper. But what people might not know is that we have other divisions that produce economic and geopolitical forecasts with which we support business leaders around the world, helping them make better decisions by using those data to better understand the world. And my part of the business is called the Economist Intelligence Unit. And we have a team of analysts based all around the world, and they forecast those big macroeconomic data and economic outcomes for almost every country around the world. So the big numbers, the GDP growth, inflation, interest rates. We also have commodity price forecasts, so what's happening with oil, what's happening with precious metals, what's happening with soft commodities such as food stuffs, wheat, grains, and all of those data need, to some degree, some translation. We need to turn that into what we would call the so what. And so the job that my part of the business does, and that's called the corporate network, is we take those data that are produced by our analysts and we socialize them with business leaders in 9 locations around the world. So that is everywhere from Johannesburg and Dubai, covering the Middle East and Africa, through Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, covering Southeast Asia, through China, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, and Tokyo for North Asia. And not forgetting the fact that we've also just opened a network in India, in Delhi, and that's very exciting as well. So I look after the team that covers all of those locations, supporting multinational and large local businesses in each of those cities, covering those broad territories to help them make sense of the world.
Before getting into what is the macro the macro environment and the geopolitical risks, what caught my attention is a term that you use. As you said, data, we analyze it to come up with information that could be used. How do you socialize data, you said?
Yeah, that's right.
How so?
And that's very important because the raw data has value.
Okay.
And of course, it has value for organizations that have their own strategy teams, their own analysts, their own economists. And many of those organizations are quite self-sufficient when it comes to analyzing data sets. So they might simply subscribe to our data and use those data within their internal teams to influence their own strategies. But a lot of organizations don't necessarily have those internal resources. Or, of course, they want a second opinion. They want to be able to sense check their own assumptions.
So this is where you come in.
And this is where we come in.
Okay.
So we then provide a little bit of hand-holding for those organizations. And not only, I think, to provide some context for the data in respect of their organizations, their sectors, their markets, but also to expose those data within their peer groups. So a lot of what we do is bringing senior business leaders together in each of those locations to talk about what is in their in tray. So what is on the top of their priority list, both in terms of the opportunities they perceive, but also in terms of the risks that they are trying to mitigate. And, when it's very powerful when you bring those business leaders together and ask them what's keeping you awake at night at the moment. And then very often you find some common ground between business leaders, even in non-competing sectors.
Okay.
So, a business leader in automotive might not have a lot in common with a business leader in chemicals, or a business leader in pharmaceuticals, or a business leader in FMCG. But they are all at the top of their game. They are all C-suite business leaders that have, proven themselves within their field. And I think the power then comes from, as I said, the socialization of our forecast data, but also including their interpretations of that for their own organizations. And you will often find quite common ground developing. Oh, I didn't know you guys were also facing the same problems. And, what can we do as industry leaders to either take advantage of the opportunities that arise from those or to control the risks?
Okay. I think somehow proactively you answered my next question, and correct me if I'm. Does it matter the nature of the business of the corporation when you come in? Because you mentioned it could be automotive, it could be oil. So,
I think different organizations in different sectors will have different ways of interpreting the macroeconomic and geopolitical landscape, and different parts of those data sets are going to mean more or less to those individuals depending on what they do.
Okay.
For some people, the oil price will be absolutely critical. For others, it might not matter so much. For some people, inflation might be significant. For others, less so, depending on their exposure to some of those price increases. So, we can't say that our data sets are a one-size-fits-all solution.
It doesn't.
And again, that's where I think sometimes we can provide that guidance to say, for an organization in your space, these are the early warning signs I think you should be looking for.
Okay.
And yes, so we do try to provide some elaboration of our data and our forecasts depending on the sector. But equally powerful is the opportunity to provide the perspectives of different industries, because I think if you've constantly got your head down focused on your own sector, you lose that peripheral vision.
True.
Now, it may not be that peripheral vision is urgent and important all the time, but I think to just be able to have an eye on what's coming down the line is really important. I mean, some of those black swan events are very hard to predict, but actually there are a number of things that happen in markets which are predictable if you are consumers of the sorts of data that provide those indicators. And again, I think that's an area where we can help organizations to say, look, this is what we think is starting to happen here. And then organizations can start scenario planning. Well, if A, then B. Or, if this happens, what might our response be? And again, organizations, I think, that undertake those sorts of scenario plans are much better prepared for when unexpected events happen.
In risky situations, in risky environments and landscapes, for example, the COVID, is it fair to say that your data was used in a way for company A differently than for company B? Because as you know, during COVID, some organization benefited from it. It was an opportunity for them.
Of course.
For others, for example, we're not gonna, advertise the Zoom, the online services. They boomed. Whereas, so does your data help either, since it's not one size fits all?
Yeah, I think COVID was a very peculiar time, even for an organization like ours. And I'm not going to make any bold claims to suggest that we predicted it, or even were ahead of the curve in terms of understanding exactly what it meant for the regional or global economies.
Okay.
I think, however, it gave us some really important learnings for how we could adapt our forecasts in a much higher frequency way than normal. So typically our output, our forecasts will change on a monthly frequency.
Okay.
But in those rapidly changing environments, that might not be enough. And so we were providing much more frequent updates and trying to enable our customers to understand what was happening in real time as best as we could. I mean, it's very difficult to be changing forecasts on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, because you change one measure or metric within your book and it knocks everything.
Absolutely.
So making those small tweaks can have some seriously unintended consequences. But I think it made us much more fleet of foot. It made us much more responsive. It made us much more reactive. And it made us understand much better how, in a fast-changing environment, we could adapt our services and our guidance for our customers.
Okay. Let's get into macroeconomic. Macro is the bigger picture.
Indeed.
Okay. In simple terms, what is it, and how can organizations take advantage of it? How you play your role?
Sure. So the macroeconomic data that we produce creates, I think, a very clear picture of the state of the global, regional, and country, and sometimes state-level economies.
Okay.
And those data would be led by indicators and metrics that we would recognize, such as GDP growth. Now, I think it's a fair accusation that sometimes economists are a little bit too obsessed with GDP as the ultimate measure of success. And there are many other things that people might judge to be a sign of success or growth or happiness or any of the other measures. But GDP growth is a really useful indicator of the progression of economies, and we use that, I guess, as one of our lead indicators. But there are lots of other things as well that would signal the health of an economy. Inflation, for example. And we are coming out of a period of significantly higher and stickier inflation than we got used to over a long period of time.
Right.
We were in a period of low inflation for such a long time, and with low inflation came low interest rates, cheap borrowing, cheap money, and I think we all got quite used to that until the shock of the pandemic, and then of course the impact of the war in Ukraine caused those shockwaves to the global economy. Huge price increases on a number of commodities, including foodstuffs, which raised the cost of living and led central banks then to have to tighten monetary policy and increase interest rates. Exactly. And so, a lot of those indicators changed as a result of that. And again, we are there to provide some guidance for what that means for businesses. When borrowing is more expensive, when prices are higher, what do they do in respect of their own goods and services? Do you necessarily, if the input costs of your goods and services go up, do you necessarily need to pass that on to customers? What is the risk of doing that? How elastic is the demand for your services? So if I put prices up by 10%, does that potentially mean I'm losing customers? And so, all of those things I think are really important considerations for business leaders. And the macroeconomic picture, is not everything, but I think it's really, really important. It also, I think, shows organizations where opportunities lie. Bearing in mind that our forecasts tend to run out to 5 years hence. So at the moment, we're forecasting out to 2030. And you can do some really interesting things with that. If you compound those annual GDP growth forecasts, you can see how much bigger an economy will be in 5 years' time than it is now. And so when you're looking at business opportunities, you want to be looking to take advantage of economies that are in a significant growth phase where there is going to be significantly more demand for products and services. If you combine that then with something else that we produce, which is an assessment of the quality of the business environments in each of those locations, then I think that's when you start to spot significant opportunity. So country X is going to be fast growing,
Okay.
and country X also has a relatively easy business environment. It's an easy place to invest. It's an easy place to employ. It's an easy place to do business. And that as a combination then is quite important.
Okay. Your 5-year projection, how could it be affect moving to the next main topic of our conversation? How could it be affected by the geopolitical landscape? I mean, it's like, which one comes first, the egg or the chicken?
Well, that's
The macro
yeah.
affects the geopolitical or vice versa?
Yes. I mean, which is the causal direction here? It's an interesting question. Look, stable and effective government, um,
I can withstand whatever.
is a necessary, probably not sufficient condition of economic growth. In fact, government effectiveness is for us an important factor in assessing the quality of the business environment. That's one of 11 measures. So it's not everything, but it's important. Geopolitical relationships and the risk of geopolitical shockwaves, as we've seen recently, can throw
right?
the global economy and, of course, regional economies into significant turmoil. So, when there is a sudden outbreak of war or conflict, especially if that is unexpected, then that, of course, will send markets into something of a nosedive, into a panic. Not just, I suppose, in respect of sentiment, uncertainty, what that does for capital expenditure.
Right.
People tend to hold back. Consumers tend to stop spending if they feel insecure. But of course, also in respect of how countries interact with each other,
Exactly.
and how those relationships are changing is significant for trade flows. So, we talked about war as one example of geopolitical risk, but let's not forget that we have a president in the White House who is upending decades and decades of global trade relationships. And Mr. Trump and his tariffs have also caused quite a significant series of economic shocks and reactions and counter-reactions. So, that is another way of looking at the world and thinking, well, actually, in a world that became very globalized, some of that is now being unpicked, and some of those trade relations are being tested in a way they haven't been tested before.
How important agility in this case, flexibility, resilience?
Yeah.
Those three factors, how important are they in managing such situation?
Well, as much as you can do, it's not easy to be flexible and agile in terms of your supply chains because you can't change them overnight.
True.
If you're an organization that has significant manufacturing facilities in one part of the world and trade relations or other geopolitical shock factors suddenly make that more difficult, you can't just say we're going to pick up that factory and move it, or change our suppliers, change where we get our raw materials. This all takes time. So yes, of course, diversification will be an important aspect of this. So, you don't find yourself overexposed to a single territory, a single trade route, a single logistics route. Of course, we saw what happened when the Red Sea became much more difficult to traverse, and what that meant for organizations having to send all of their ships around the Cape of Good Hope at a cost of an extra 2 weeks on their supply routes.
Or what meant for 1/3 of the world supply of oil.
Well, indeed, if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, then that, as you say, disrupts a third of the world's oil supply and typically would cause a significant spike in oil prices, from where we are today in the high 60s to low 70s, as much as $150 a barrel. And so,
this will have, ramifications.
Huge knock-on effects. I mean, in some respects, quite good for our region. But, a higher oil price is only good for our region if it's coupled with continuity of supply. If the reason that oil price is high is because the region can't move its oil, then of course, actually, that is no good. So it's not quite as simple as saying high oil price, happy,
or always happy ending. You're right. A couple more minutes.
Cool.
We still have your advice or advices for leaders locally, regionally, and internationally, globally, to what to do, how to look at macro economics, their effect, and the geopolitical, what to watch for.
I'll try very hard not to make this an advertisement for my services, but of course, what I would say is keep yourself informed, maintain that peripheral vision, ensure that you understand the shape of the economic landscape and geopolitical risk and opportunity. Organizations like ours, of course, provide the sorts of data and guidance that I think business leaders should be taking heed of and paying attention to. If they have internal resources that allow them to understand, use, and turn those data into strategic insights and better decision-making opportunities, then great. If they don't, then there are lots of people out there that can provide that guidance. There are organizations like ours that can do that. But I think at the same time, networking with your fellow business leaders is also significantly important. Don't stay in your lane. Be curious. Understand what is affecting business leaders in other sectors, in other parts of the world. Broadening your understanding of the wider business ecosystem and the challenges that others are facing will make you much readier for those challenges if they come your way. If you understand what's happening in other parts of the world, or if you understand what's happening in other sectors, then you'll be more ready, you'll be more resilient when your time comes.
Proactive.
Yes, of course. And learning from others' mistakes. Learning from, I think about some of the testimony that we hear at some of our events, because our events typically are closed-door Chatham House rules, and we encourage open communication and we encourage people to speak frankly. And I think within that environment, within a community of other business leaders, people are quite open and quite frank about the things that their organization has got right and the things that they've got wrong. And why would you want to leave yourself open to making the same mistakes that others have made if, for the sake of attending events and speaking to your fellow C-suite business leaders, you could prepare yourself to avoid those bear traps?
So history won't repeat itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mr. Robert Willock, it's been a pleasure. I thank you for all the information you've shared with us. And you're always welcome to join us on our podcast at Merck's Training and Consulting.
Thank you. It's been fun. Yeah.
Thank you. All right.